My name is Daniel. I'm 34 years old, and what I'm about to tell you happened exactly 2 years ago. To this day, I wake up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat, remembering those 3 nights that completely changed my life. You're going to think I'm making this up, that it's impossible, but I swear on my grandmother's memory that every word I'm about to say is true. Before I begin, you need to understand something. I've always been a skeptical person. I've worked as a software engineer for over 10 years. I'm a rational person who believes in data, logic, and scientific explanations for everything. I never believed in supernatural stories, ghosts, or anything like that. Until that summer. It all started when I decided to take a break from my life. I was going through a very difficult time. I had ended a 5-year relationship, was stressed at work, and felt like I needed some time for myself. I decided to rent an isolated cabin in the mountains for a month. It was a very remote place, surrounded by a dense forest that stretched for kilometers. The cabin belonged to a man named Marcos, a man of about 60 years old, gray hair, calloused hands of someone who had worked outdoors all his life. When I went to get the keys, he gave me all the basic instructions, where the generator was, how to light the fireplace, where the firewood was stored. But as I was leaving, he grabbed my arm. "Listen carefully, young man," he said, looking directly into my eyes with a seriousness that caught my attention. "The cabin is yours for the time you paid for. You can do whatever you want during the day. But there's one rule that cannot be broken. Never, under any circumstances, enter the forest after dark." I laughed immediately. I thought it was some local superstition. Maybe he was afraid I'd get lost in the dark or something like that. "All right, Mr. Marcos, I wasn't planning to hike at night anyway." But he didn't laugh. He kept staring at me with that serious look. "It's no joke, Daniel. It's not about getting lost. It's about other things. Things you won't want to encounter." I just nodded, still thinking it was typical countryside exaggeration, and headed to the cabin. The first few days were perfect. I'd wake up early, take long walks during the day through the forest, which was beautiful, full of century-old trees, crystal-clear streams, a peace I hadn't felt in years. I'd spend the afternoons reading, cooking, enjoying the silence. It was exactly what I needed. But on the 5th night, something changed. I was on the cabin's porch, having tea before bed, when I heard a sound coming from the forest. It was like music, but very distant, almost imperceptible. A melancholy that touched something deep inside me, like nostalgia for something I didn't even know I was missing. I stood there, trying to identify what it was. It didn't seem to come from any instrument I knew. It was as if there were several human voices singing in harmony, but in a language I didn't recognize. The sound was hypnotizing, and I felt a strange urge to walk toward it. That's when I remembered Mr. Marcos's words. I shook my head, quickly finished my tea, and went inside the cabin, locking the door behind me. But the sound continued all night long, quietly, almost whispering, but constant. I tried to sleep with cotton in my ears, but I could still hear it. The next morning, I woke up exhausted. During my morning walk, I looked for any sign of what could have caused that sound. I thought maybe they were nocturnal birds, or the wind in the trees creating some acoustic effect. But I found nothing that could explain it. That night, the sound returned. This time louder, clearer, and I noticed something that gave me chills. The music seemed to be approaching the cabin. What the previous night came from very far away now seemed to come from just a few hundred meters into the forest. I grabbed a flashlight and went to the porch. The music was definitely closer, and now I could distinguish that they were indeed human voices. Men, women, even what seemed to be children, all singing together in perfect harmony. But the language remained incomprehensible. The strangest thing was that the music awakened in me an emotion I couldn't name. It was as if it touched directly into my soul, bringing up memories I didn't even know I had. Memories of when I was a child, of happy moments I had forgotten, but also a deep sadness, as if I were losing something very precious. Without realizing it, I started walking toward the forest. The music seemed to call me, invite me. I only realized what I was doing when my feet touched the wet grass at the edge of the woods. I stopped immediately, my heart racing. I ran back inside the cabin and locked all the doors and windows. But the music continued until dawn. On the 3rd day, I decided to call Mr. Marcos. I needed to understand what was happening. Mr. Marcos, this is Daniel, who rented your cabin. Hi, young man. Everything okay up there? Look, I wanted to ask you something. Do you know if there's any group that meets in the forest at night to sing? Some choir or... There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Daniel, he said finally, and I could hear the concern in his voice. Did you hear the music? So, you know what I'm talking about. Listen carefully, pack your bags now, and leave. Leave the cabin, I'll refund your money. But get out of there today. Mr. Marcos, with all due respect, I need to understand what's happening. It's just people singing, isn't it? Another long silence. They're not people, Daniel. Not anymore. What do you mean, not anymore? That forest, it has a history. Many years ago, a group of people got lost in there during a terrible storm. They were entire families, men, women, children. They sought shelter among the densest trees, but the storm lasted for days. When rescuers finally managed to enter the forest, they found no one, neither alive nor dead. They simply disappeared. I felt a chill in my stomach. And what does this have to do with the music? A few weeks after the disappearance, reports began. People said they heard chanting coming from the forest during the night. The same music you're hearing. And whoever followed the sound, well, some of those people never came back. That's urban legend, Mr. Marcos. Daniel, I've lived here my whole life. I've seen people enter that forest following the music and never come out. I've seen others who managed to resist, but became obsessed, returned every night to listen. Some went insane. I didn't know what to say. Part of me still wanted to believe there was a rational explanation, but another part was starting to get genuinely scared. What do you think is happening? I asked. I think those people who got lost in the storm, they're still there, and they want company. I hung up the phone with trembling hands. But even scared, part of me couldn't accept that explanation. I needed proof, something concrete. That night, I prepared myself. I got my camera, an audio recorder, extra flashlights, even a GPS so I wouldn't get lost. My idea was to stay at the edge of the forest, record the music, maybe get some images, and prove there was a logical explanation for all of this. When the music started, around 10 at night, I was already positioned at the entrance to the woods with all my equipment. I turned on the recorder and pointed the camera into the forest. What I saw through the camera lens almost made me faint. Among the trees, there were lights. They weren't flashlights or bonfires. It was as if they were people glowing with their own light, ethereal, ghostly. There were dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all singing together. I could see the outlines, men, women, children, exactly as Mr. Marcos had described. But the most terrifying thing was that they were moving in my direction. Slowly, as if they were a procession, those luminous figures walked through the trees, getting closer and closer to the edge of the forest where I was. The music got louder, more intense, and I felt that strange compulsion to go meet them. That's when I realized I wasn't alone at the edge of the woods. To my left, about 20 meters away, there was another person, a man, standing motionless, looking into the forest. He wore modern clothes, jeans, and a jacket, but there was something strange about his posture. He was completely still, like a statue. "Hey," I shouted to him. "Are you okay?" He didn't respond. He didn't move a millimeter. I quickly put away my equipment and walked over to him. When I got close, what I saw made my blood freeze. The man had been dead for a long time. His skin was dried out, his eyes empty, but he remained standing. And the most frightening part, he was smiling. A wide, unnatural smile, as if he were in ecstasy. I screamed and ran back to the cabin, stumbling along the way, my heart almost jumping out of my mouth. I locked myself inside and stayed awake all night, listening to the music that now seemed to come from all sides. The next day, I packed all my things and returned to the city. I didn't even wait for the rental to end. I needed to get out of there. But the story doesn't end there. 2 weeks later, when I was already home trying to convince myself that everything had been just a hallucination caused by stress, I received a call from Mr. Marcos. "Daniel, I need to tell you something." "Hi, Mr. Marcos. They found a body in the forest this morning." My stomach churned. "The man I saw? Probably. But Daniel, according to the police, he disappeared more than 10 years ago. And there's something strange, The body was standing upright at the edge of the woods, as if he were waiting for something. I hung up the phone and went to check the recordings I had made that night. The audio was clear. You could clearly hear the music, the voices singing in harmony. But when I opened the video file, there was only darkness. The camera hadn't captured anything of the lights I had seen with my own eyes. In the following months, I tried to research the history of the forest. I found old records of a group of 23 people who had indeed disappeared during a storm, exactly as Mr. Marcos had told me. I also found police reports of at least 15 people who disappeared in the region over the years, all on new moon nights. But what disturbed me most was discovering a pattern. All the disappearances happened after people reported hearing music coming from the forest. A few months ago, I returned to the region. Not to the cabin. I'll never approach that place again, but to the nearest town. I want to talk to more local residents, better understand the history. That's when I met Mrs. Elena, a 78-year-old lady who had lived there since childhood. She told me something that made me finally understand what was happening. My grandfather used to say that forest was special, she told me, serving coffee in the simple kitchen of her house. He said that when people die with great suffering, with a great will to live, they get trapped between worlds. And when this happens in a group, when many people die together in the same place, they create a kind of community. Community? Yes. They continue there, living as if nothing had happened. They sing together, console each other. But over time, they get lonely. They miss the world of the living. And then they start calling other people to join them. And how do they do this? With music. Music is like a spell. It awakens in us nostalgia for home, for family, for belonging. It makes us want to be part of that community, that perfect harmony. And whoever goes, well, they never come back the same. She showed me a yellowed photo of a young, handsome man, smiling at the camera. This was my brother, Roberto. He disappeared 40 years ago after hearing the music. They found his body 3 days later at the edge of the forest. But Daniel, she looked directly into my eyes. When they found him, he was smiling as if he had found exactly what he was looking for. I left Mrs. Elena's house with more questions than answers. But one thing I was sure of, that forest held something that was beyond my understanding. During the trip back home, I stopped at the gas station where I had met Mr. Marcos. He was there, filling up an old pickup truck. Mr. Marcos. He turned and recognized me immediately. Daniel, young man, good to see you. How are you? Fine, Mr. Marcos. Listen, I wanted to thank you for warning me about the forest. And I wanted to ask something. Why do you keep renting the cabin if you know the risks? He sighed deeply, taking off his cap and running his hand through his gray hair. Because I believe not everyone is called Daniel. The music, it only calls those who have a very big emptiness inside them. People who are searching for something, who feel lost, alone. You were going through a difficult time when you arrived here, weren't you? It was true. I was lost, confused, looking for answers. But there are people who go there just to relax, to fish, to enjoy nature. These people never hear anything. The music only comes to those who need to hear it. Need to hear it? Yes, Daniel. Some people need that call to make a choice between continuing to suffer here or finding peace in another way. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that sometimes the forest offers an alternative for those who can no longer live with the pain. Those words kept echoing in my head during the entire trip back. Had I really been called? Deep down, did part of me want to disappear, want to escape the pain I was feeling? The truth is yes. At that moment in my life, I was so lost, so tired of fighting, that part of me really wanted to simply vanish. And maybe those voices in the forest had sensed that. But something inside me had resisted. Maybe fear, maybe rationality, or maybe it just wasn't my time. Today, 2 years later, I can say my life has completely changed. Not because of what happened in the forest, but because of the perspective that experience gave me. I realized I had a choice. Either I continued drowning in my sadness, or I did something to change it. I went back to therapy, reconnected with old friends, changed jobs to something that gave me more satisfaction. I met someone special, an incredible woman who is now my wife. We had a daughter 6 months ago. Sometimes when I'm holding my daughter in my arms, looking into those curious little eyes, I think about what I would have lost if I had followed that music that night. I think about all the experiences, all the moments of joy that would have been left behind. But I also think about those people in the forest. Did they find the peace they were looking for? Are they really happy there, singing eternally among the trees? I don't know, and maybe I never will. What I do know is that each of us, at some point in life, hears a music calling. It may not be literal like the one I heard, but we all face moments when we need to choose between following an easy path that promises to end our pain or continuing to fight, continuing to live, even when it hurts. I chose to continue, and today I can say it was the best decision I ever made. But sometimes, especially on new moon nights, when the wind hits the window of my apartment, I can still hear, very quietly, almost imperceptible, a distant melody. A music that speaks of home, of belonging, of a place where suffering no longer exists. And for a few seconds, just a few seconds, I feel that strange urge to walk toward the sound. But then I look at my wife sleeping beside me, think of my daughter in the next room, and remember everything I have here. I remember that life, even with all its pain and difficulty, is worth living. The music stops, and I sleep peacefully. That's why I tell this story. Not to scare you, but so you understand that we all have a forest inside us. A dark place where our pains, our fears, our desire to give up life. And sometimes, when we're most vulnerable, we hear music coming from that place, calling us inside. But we also have a choice. We always have a choice. And if you're going through a difficult time, if you're hearing some music that calls you to a dark place, I want you to remember something. On the other side of pain, there is life. There is joy. There are people who love you and moments worth living. Don't follow the music. Resist. Seek help. Talk to someone. Because no matter how dark the forest where you are seems, there is always a path back to the light. And if one day you pass through a forest at night and hear beautiful, hypnotizing music that makes you want to walk among the trees, remember my story. Remember that not every music that seems inviting is really calling us to a better place. Sometimes, the most dangerous music is the one that promises to end our pain, but actually just wants to take us away from the people we love and the moments we still have to live. Don't enter the forest at night. And if you hear the music, run. Run back home, to the people who love you, to the life you still have ahead. Because life, no matter how difficult it sometimes is always worth more than any promise of eternal peace that comes from the dark. Thank you for listening to me. And if any of you have ever heard similar music, you know what I'm talking about. And if you never have, I hope you never need to. Take care of yourselves. And remember, there is always a path back to the light.